question. Um, you may have to speak up a little bit because I can hear all the ambient noises. But if you have a question in the middle, please just speak out. Uh, so yeah, I'm a PhD student at EPFL in Switzerland, and I'm in between two labs. So originally, I'm from like a computer science background, a machine learning background, and so I'm mostly hosted in the lab of Professor Deverstuya, where we work on machine learning applied to the environment. But I'm also in another lab where there's a bunch of things being done, but it's mostly hosts the Transnational Red Sea Center, which is basically EPFL's, let's say, hub for doing coral reef research, which is centered around the Red Sea. And through this, we get to collaborate with many partners in the Red Sea. I'll go into that a little bit later. So yeah, I know you guys are a robotics audience, so and you probably know a thing or two about corals as well. I'll try to keep it short, this intro. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys know corals are in pretty bad shape. There's a really disastrous bleaching event that hit, more than 80% of reefs in the last like the last year. And yeah, so most corals basically undergo this mass bleaching when the temperature rises above their thermal bleaching threshold. And what will happen is that entire reefs will bleach and then die at once because the bleaching basically starves them because it removes the algae inside them. So this is bad news for most corals worldwide, and of course, we should do our very best to limit the warming of the oceans. But in particular, in the Red Sea, there's a kind of a small hope, which is that the corals are relatively heat resistant. So the working theory is that the Red Sea, after the last ice age, was flooded from the south, and the ancestor corals, let's say, that live all across the Red Sea basically had to travel in from the very warm south, which has much warmer water than the cold north, which is still warm, but like 5-ish degrees colder. And it's been shown that basically in the whole northern part of the Red Sea, most of the main genera will be able to withstand 4 or even 5 or 6 degrees of ocean warming. So that means in terms of global warming, these corals are particularly resistant. But of course, there's still the threat of local damages from destructive fishing practices, sedimentation through coastline exploitation, pollution, and so on. So there's a really big interest to, of course, monitor these corals and be able to respond quickly to these changes in the environment that may make them die. On the other hand, we have the situation where if we look at like the most comprehensive coral reef monitoring report, the GCR-MN report, if you look at the Red Sea chapter from 2020, I mean Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, we get these kind of uncertain graphs. So there are many years where there's basically no data for the whole Southern Red Sea or the Gulf of Aden, and we have these really big uncertainties. And yeah, so we don't really know what's going on as much as we would want to. And especially if we take a look at the surveys that have been submitted into this uh, report, we'll find that more than 80% of the surveys are uh, done during 1 year and not followed up over multiple years. And also for more than 80% of these surveys, basically there's no actual information about how the survey was done, what method was used. And so these numbers have to be taken with a bit of a, let's say, with the uncertainties that surround them, right? Um, and I mean, the conventional way of doing these surveys will be to, really count them by hand across these established transect sites, where, an expert will go with a clipboard and then kind of write down what's there and count it. Of course, a little bit more standardized are these photo quadrats, which are used a lot, where kind of a frame or a reference frame of a known size is is moved across your transect or across a place that you know. And then these images are either analyzed by hand also or fed into some tools which are really helpful. Here I put CoralNet and Reef Cloud, but I know there's others out there that are like Mermaid and a few other ones that are used a lot and actually help a lot in these kind of workflows that probably make up, the vast majority of coral reef monitoring done right now. But still, in general, these workflows are being improved, but they're limited in scalability. Like we ideally would want to map larger areas and know what's going on in larger areas, and also further limit kind of the bias that could be introduced by the human analysts using these softwares or doing the analysis by hand. And so what's becoming really popular in the field is, of course, photogrammetry. So I'll mostly speak about 3D mapping, but in the end, even for doing orthomosaics, you'll need successful 3D map, like key-point matching, which basically amounts to the same thing. And this is really cool because when you have your photogrammetric model of your reef, you can basically compare it to time points, and you have something that's archival in a way. So uh, the images will be there. You can compare and contrast them. It's something that's tangible. Um, and these softwares are also improving as we speak, and they're really cool, and they can really make really high resolution models. But as of right now, there's still kind of two, I'd say, main challenges in really using them, or like that really inhibit them being used all the time. One is that just having a nice 3D model of a coral reef is cool, but we still need to kind of process this in a way to use this in monitoring, right? So the key stats that we want from this, like the live coral cover or the cover of a specific subclass, a specific coral, or any other benthic class, still needs to somehow be extracted from this. So there's a big analysis bottleneck. And generally, to make these photogrammetric reconstructions work well, you'll need to provide pretty good data. So generally, the images will be taken in a very curated way. They'll be with high quality cameras, pretty good lighting conditions, usually pretty good visibility conditions, and usually like kind of downward facing angles. So you don't want to have too much of the water column on them and so on. So I'd say these are maybe the main challenges in using these to, yeah, basically do any sort of monitoring or every sort of monitoring. And so when I started my PhD, I thought a little bit like, what would the next generation of coral monitoring tools look like? And ideally, it should be really scalable. Like you should be able to map like really large areas of reef in a very short amount of time. Um, Scalable also in the sense that like it shouldn't require really expensive equipment. It should be able to, I mean, should be done with any camera or anything that's good enough. Repeatable, of course. So this means that, if we go to the same place, it should like same place, same time, or like twice in the same day, we should get the same data out of it. It should be as automated as possible because expert time is expensive, and also I think there are many, many experts whose time is just better used doing something else than these repetitive monitoring tasks. And it should basically include the entry barrier to using these tools should be low. So it should be really robust. It should be easy to use. And again, like I want to emphasize, it should be really kind of cheap. The equipment, the logistics, everything should be cheap. And so I'll talk about a few projects that I've done in this PhD, which will be related mostly to the Red Sea. Um, and I'll start with kind of actually the latest project, which maybe sets the stage a little bit for some of the other things. Um, yeah, so in the Red Sea in particular, we especially this last point that it's supposed to be cheap is really important because there are many countries in the Red Sea that have very, very limited research and monitoring budgets. I know that in Australia it's very well organized, and you guys work with a little bit of a different structure. But yeah, so in the Red Sea, we really want to emphasize this. We want to build technology that's actually being used. So I'll start with this data set that we built called the Coralscapes data set. And basically, this is really just a big annotation effort. I mean, data collection and annotation effort. And what we basically want to have is like general purpose semantic segmentation. So we don't want to just classify photo quadrats or these like very controlled kind of images. We really want kind of a data set that allows us to train neural networks to really kind of do a pretty good job of segmenting any sort of reef images. And for this, we, yeah, basically took a lot of video data. So we have something like 200 hours of videos from 6 countries in the Red Sea and more than 50 different reefs. And we basically delineated all of the all of the classes of interest. So this means, of course, we annotated the main corals that we can identify, but also other things like, we have a background class, which we use to basically uh, segment anything that cannot really be identified with certainty. So we apply this very like careful annotation strategy. The same is true for like specific genuses, where if we can say for sure this is an acropora, we put it as acropora. If it's a bit further away, we'll put it as branching coral. If it's too far away, it goes as background. Because we really want to not have something that's very speculative. So this has been a really large annotation effort and data collection effort. And yeah, so we designed this specifically to mimic the very famous cityscapes data set, which is used a lot in computer vision, which is a self-driving data set. I mean, self-driving car data set from different cities. And also we basically designed the whole thing also to have like a train test split where the reefs and the split will be from really different places, so that there's really kind of a simulation of what would happen if you use this on your new reef. So in total, it's like 174,000 annotation masks of 39 classes, which is something like 10 live coral classes, 5 dead coral classes, 5 bleached coral classes, and 2,075 images, which is relatively big. So the cityscapes data set is something like 5,000 images. But the cityscapes, I mean, these sort of data can be crowdsourced, whereas this had to be done by experts. And so when we train models on coralscapes, we can get kind of semantic segmentation of any sort of imagery. So here it's just shown on a video, and it's pretty clear that at least in the Red Sea context, we can use this for some sort of monitoring applications, but also we can think about marine robotics where like having the background and the fish and like other objects that we don't want to bump into, like divers, that can be segmented, can be pretty helpful. But also one of the main goals was to kind of help tackle this bottleneck in analyzing photogrammetric reconstructions that have been done in the Red Sea. So like this is an example where you just have a few images taken with a GoPro of a transect in the northern Red Sea. So taking these photos took like 3 minutes, and then throwing them into CalMap. So a very well-known SFM, like structure for motion 3D reconstruction software. We can basically then project the semantic information onto this point cloud, and within a few minutes, basically do something. I mean, do something which, if we were to do it on the 3D point cloud, like annotating the corals or trying to segment the 3D point cloud, it would be a lot harder than if we basically go straight from the images and transfer this information into the 3D maps. So this is about the data set itself, and I'll keep coming back to it a little bit because it's used in many of the components that I'll speak about later. Um, but yeah, so this still depends kind of on the successful 3D reconstruction in the end. And ideally, what we want is something that's really robust. So something that kind of just always works. And so the main method that we use now in the Red Sea and with our partners that we use for monitoring is a method that we call deep reef map, not because it maps deep reefs, but because it uses deep learning. So the name was a bit unfortunate in the end. But the idea is basically to go straight from video into your 3D maps. So this is a little demo video where on the top left, you'll just have, it's sped up by 4 times, where you have just a video of a transect in the Red Sea. And then top right, you see the semantic segmentation that I spoke about. But the more interesting component in this setup is this SLAM component, so this simultaneous localization mapping component, which basically does 2 things. One is estimate the depth of, like depth being the distance to the camera of all the things that we see on the images, but also it estimates the camera movement in the scene. And so when we combine this, we can basically create a 3D map of the environment, which we can then look at from bird's eye view. And the system basically works in real time. So we can do something like, yeah, I mean, we wouldn't do it underwater because that makes no sense. But when we when we take these videos out of the water, and let's say it's a 5-minute video to do a 100-meter transect, like processing this whole thing takes, yeah, roughly 5 minutes, 5, 6 minutes on like a regular laptop with a GPU, like a gaming laptop. And the camera used here was a GoPro. So this is also kind of, I mean, I guess one of the cheapest cameras that you can buy that works reliably underwater. You can even buy them in the Red Sea area. You can buy them in yeah, Djibouti, even in Eritrea. And so when we have these 3D maps, it's very easy to just ortho project them and get the stats of interest. So of course we could summarize all of them and just do live coral cover, but because we have more information, we could also look at more fine-grained information. Um, so how does this work? The underlying oops, the underlying, let's say, technology underlying idea is this unsupervised monocular SLAM. So the issue is that underwater, of course, it's very hard to get really good ground truth depth estimates. Depth, again, being the distance of the camera. Um, but it's very easy to get a lot of data just by filming and diving around a lot. And the general idea of these sort of methods is to train neural networks by reprojecting video frames onto each other that then kind of give you a good signal to learn a depth and a pose estimation. And so these pose transforms, I'm sure you're familiar with this, they're basically 6D. So we have the rotation and the translation. But of course, the rotation is generally parameterized as a matrix for easier multiplication and so on. And when we have an image and a depth estimate and a pose estimate, we can basically reproject the images onto each other and calculate this residual. So like basically the error of yeah, what the image actually looks like versus what the reprojected predicted point cloud looks like. And if we basically train this sort of network, like these sort of networks on a lot of video data, using many, many different videos from different scenes, then we get a pretty good, yeah, neural network that can look at an image and predict the depth, and also look at two images and predict how the camera moves in between these images. When we do this underwater, we have to, of course, think about the fact that cameras generally have air inside and have water outside. So we have this refraction problem. There's a really clever paper which came out in 2021, which basically finds a really simple way to parameterize this projection operation so that the distortion parameters are actually learned also as part of the process and the self-supervised or the unsupervised SLAM learning. And this seems to work pretty well. So for example, here we see like a original video frame, and the lines of this clipboard are of course supposed to be straight. And then with the learned distortion parameters, we can undo almost all of the distortion. And this has been working really well for us. So this is, yeah, always integrated. And then of course, to make a point cloud is very easy with these kind of setups. So basically you just take your new video and you iterate through the frames from a single frame using your learned distorted camera model. You use your depth estimate and basically make a point cloud out of the single image. Then you move the camera with your pose estimate to the next frame, and then you keep adding points to your point cloud. So basically this works at the speed that your neural networks are able to process these frames. I mean, with some limitations, of course, if your point cloud becomes really large and so on. But this is the general paradigm. So making point clouds is very easy. If we were to just do this naively, of course, we would get like really bad artifacts from the water column, the water surface, divers, fish, and so on. But because we have the semantic segmentation anyways, we can just remove them before projecting them out into the point cloud. So this is kind of what the point clouds look like after. So it's clear that the quality is not as good as you would get with like a full-fledged 3D reconstruction structure for motion system. Um, but I think for most of like the coarse monitoring that's being done, like really like what's the life percent coral cover, how's it changing? I think it's good enough. And the cool thing is basically this kind of technology is very, very robust. So whereas when you do structure for motion, if something doesn't work, you usually get kind of really catastrophic failures. Here, you'll often get something that's kind of okay. And if like a small part in your transect point cloud is a little bit smudged, I think the impact on the final live coral cover is largely negligible. So yeah, so this is kind of nice also for the practitioners because it's maybe less frustrating to use in the cases where something wasn't optimal during the data acquisition. So this is published in Methods in Ecology a while ago. We're still improving this as we speak, so some of the things I spoke about are not in this original paper. Um, but yeah, now I want to go into kind of a more computer vision, a more technical aspect of, or something, a project that builds on this basically. And the idea is basically to reformulate this whole unsupervised monocular SLAM idea to remove the caustics and the backscatter, or to at least lessen their effects. Um, so the caustics are these, here on this image, these kind of patterns that happen from when the water, like sunlight hits the water surface, there's waves and there's like lensing happening that makes some areas brighter and some areas darker, and these patterns change super rapidly. And yeah, backscatter is part of the signal that makes the water kind of appear either blue or green as the distance increases. And yeah, so as I mentioned before, if you kind of if you try to do 3D reconstructions with these conventional 3D mapping softwares, um, and your data is poor, for example, if it has these caustics, either you get like catastrophic failures quite often, or you get these partial failures where you have some components that work pretty well, but the general structure is just not good enough to yeah to work with it. But even when you get the structure generally right, doing imaging or doing dense reconstructions underwater will usually give you quite a lot of artifacts. So here we have, it's a little bit hard to see, I think, but we have these blue points that basically dominate parts of the point cloud. Because when something is viewed from further away, it seems blue. The distance estimation is a little bit wrong. So we hope that we can kind of alleviate these artifacts also in conventional 3D mapping. And so first for the uh, backscatter removal. So I'll start with some results just to make sure that it's clear what I want to do here. So we have our input image, which is here on the left, which kind of is obstructed by the water column. So we either have green or blue water, or I mean, sometimes brown water. And we basically want to split the image into the direct signal, which has less blue and green, and the backscatter, which we actually just want to discard. And this follows, in general, like an additive rule. So really the photons that arrive at the camera will be a sum of the direct signal and the backscattered signal. There's some simplifications here. So the direct signal is, of course, also changed by the water, but especially in shallow waters, usually it's the backscatter that dominates this change. And the backscatter is follows also kind of a simple rule. So in general, there's some sort of color at infinity. So if we just look straight into the water column, um, and yeah, then we'll have some sort of color, the color of the water. So these are three numbers, like for red, green, and blue, um, for a regular camera. Again, I'm simplifying a little bit here because this is only really true for raw images. But here we're working with uh, yeah, with PNG images that have already been processed. Um, and there's another set of parameters, these beta parameters, which basically describe how quickly we get to this color at infinity with the depth. So if we have really turbid waters, we'll get to our color at infinity very quickly. If we have very clear waters, it'll be less quick. And yeah, so we basically use the same like unsupervised monocular SLAM formulation to just like we have many videos, we want to minimize this photometric error. But we train a neural network basically to predict the backscatter coefficients, so these six numbers, so that if we remove the backscatter with these coefficients, we minimize the photometric error. So if we have video frames that are far enough apart, let's say they're 1 second apart, generally you'll have some areas that appear bluer in one of the frames, be grayer in the other frame, and kind of the optimal solution is always the one where we just remove the backscatter. So this is a very easy way to train neural networks to predict these coefficients, and then with the depth estimation, we can really compute the backscatter for every pixel. And then for the caustics removal, so again, on the left, we have our input images, which are here contaminated by these caustics. And then in the middle column, we'll have kind of the cleaned images. And on the right, we'll have the predicted caustics. The idea is also, in the end, very simple. The idea is basically we want to predict the photometric error from a single image. So we have a neural network that sees an image, and it's meant to give an estimate of if we do a reprojection to another image that we don't know, an unknown image, whether it's, you know, two frames forward or 2 frames backward or 5 frames forward, what's the expected error? And when we have a well-trained depth and pose estimation network, the actual error from the reprojection, so the geometry error, will be pretty small compared to the noise that's induced by the caustics when there are caustics present. So we basically just, again, sample many random image pairs. And so the neural network sees one image and tries to predict the error, but it doesn't know the second image. So the best it can do is undo the noise, which is the caustics from this image. And when we put this together, this is the demo of what it looks like. So at the top left, we have our input video. Then here we can really remove a large part of the caustics. Of course, not all of them, because it's a very simple method that just works frame by frame. And then we can also remove the backscatter, at least to a certain degree, which makes this video look better. But it's of course not only about the looks; it's really about improving the 3D mapping. So in the paper, which is already out, we show that we can improve the number of correctly matched key points, but there's also a big qualitative improvement. So here again, this is an image I showed earlier that's contaminated by these water points. But then if we feed the images that are first processed with the neural networks, we get much cleaner reconstruction. The same is true here. So here we again have this contamination by the noise, which here is removed. Yeah, and so now one thing that we're working on, which is still under review, is to assess the real world consistency of when we basically put all of this together and actually do surveying with this method. So the question is kind of if we go to a reef and we take many videos of the same reef, usually in a time where the reef doesn't change, so maybe on subsequent days or different times of the same day, what's the expected fluctuation of the results? So the simplest way to just look at it is just a live coral cover, but we could technically do this analysis for any of the classes that we're interested in. And for this, we basically run a really large surveying campaign. So we analyze data from almost all of the sites that we visited. So these are all of the sites where we have enough videos to basically get a pretty good estimate of the actual coral cover. And so basically one line in this graphic is one video of a transect, and then every one of these columns separated by black is a different site. So we have something like, I think, 45 sites in this graphic, which go from almost no coral cover to 60, 70% coral cover. And then we basically try to identify factors. So we have, for example, the video quality, like how what's the optimal angle for recording these kind of videos? Um, what's the optimal speed? What about the turbidity and so on? So we try to basically determine factors and determine the effect of these factors on the results. And we basically find that regardless of conditions, if the video is taken in a good way, the expected standard deviation from running a single survey will be within 2.2% of the live coral cover that we actually find if we do it, like if we repeat it many, many times. So it's a preliminary number. Yeah, because it's still subject to many things. Of course, this is within the Red Sea. Maybe if we move to other areas, it'll be different because the general area conditions are different, and maybe there's more genuses to consider um, and so on. But also this number, at least for the Red Sea, is expected to still go down, right? So as we keep improving the 3D mapping and as we keep improving the semantic segmentation, the error here will keep decreasing, and these surveys will become more consistent. Um, and now, as we're nearing the end, I want to talk briefly about kind of what we're working on now. So we are basically at a stage where we have deployed this technology now in 5 countries in the Red Sea. So we get a steady influx of video transects from our partners in the Red Sea. In some countries, it's once a month. In some other countries, it's like once every year, uh, which can still be really useful, especially after big heat waves. And so we want to keep working on basically evaluating the consistency of these sort of methods. And soon, as this, I mean, it's only been 2 years really that we've been collecting this kind of data, but soon we'll be able to really generate the first real monitoring insights. So, for example, the impact of this really, really large heat wave in both 2023 and 2024, especially on the southern Red Sea. And of course, we still want to keep improving all parts of the system. I already mentioned it before. So these self-supervised monocular SLAM systems were all the rage maybe 3, 4 years ago. Now, a really cool thing are these state-of-the-art 3D foundation models, um, which are based on Duster from Naver Labs in France. And also, I mean, monocular depth estimation has really undergone a revolution in the last, let's say, 2 years. Now, these models like Depth Anything V2, they do a really, really good job of predicting the depth, even in really like weird underwater scenarios. So we hope to benefit of this and fine-tune them also to our actual application. And then, of course, the semantic segmentation should yeah also be improved. So this means, of course, further growing the data set. So one thing is, of course, we want to add more images and for more reefs and more labels. And not only more, but also basically more fine-grained labels. So for now, we just provide 39 classes, but actually during the annotation, we had many more classes that we had to summarize because we don't have enough examples of them. But ideally, as the data set keeps growing, we can be pretty confident to add more classes and actually get more fine-grained understanding of the reefs. And of course, during the annotation process, we also mostly made sure that the fish are actually segmented by instances. So in the future, we want to also publish these so that uh, when we do these kind of surveys, we can also even think about identifying kind of the key species of fish that swim around in the reef to further characterize reefs in these very simple surveys that can be run fully automatically. And now I want to end this talk on kind of an opinion. Uh, and this is that I think this is one of the most important things that we can do in this community um, to share data, to collect really high quality data and share it openly and really make it not only open upon request or open in a weird way, but really make it available. So this is what I try to do. And I think this is the way that I feel I can have the highest impact on our field. Um, so, and I think it would be really great also to keep, to use the sharing of data really as a means of collaboration and making our whole community kind of yeah, lifting it up together. Um, because I think especially as someone coming from the machine learning field, this has been one of the uh, yeah, one of the interesting parts of joining the marine community, that a lot of the data is so hidden, which has very obvious reasons, of course, because there's many actual interests involved with tourism and so on. And of course, in some places it's better than in others. But I really hope like this is something that I would really like to change in the future. On that note, I am already at the end of the talk. I want to say, first of all, thank you to all our collaborators in the Red Sea area from Djibouti, Sudan, Jordan, Israel, and Eritrea. And then also a really big thank you to my collaborators directly at EPFL, so my two professors and my two close collaborators. And a special shout out, a special thank you to Victor Matatowski, who's in the Zoom actually as well, who has become my collaborator roughly last year at this time. We worked on this whole data set and the benchmarking together. And he is a PhD student at the University of Exeter now, but also at the University of Queensland. So he will actually be in Brisbane probably starting around January. I hope I'm saying the right things here. If not, please correct me, Victor. Um, so yeah, I think on that note, I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you again for coming.
Thanks, Jonathan. So we might start by taking questions here in the room first, and then I'll open it up to online. If anyone has questions, there should be time for that as well. So starting off in the room, does anyone have a question to ask Jonathan? Yes, Juan?
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for the presentation. It was very insightful. I have maybe two small technical questions. I really like your animations, especially when you were swapping between the original raw video and the segmentation. I was curious about the software, well, but that's a small question. I think my main question is more on, once you guys have produced those nice SLAM segmentation maps, have you georeferenced those output maps? So maybe for the future, for someone, if we want to do data fusion with drone or satellite imagery, we can at least try to, or at least to have an idea of how we can use those maps, georeference maps, even if it's just to inform policy or something like that.
So for the first question, these are all like my animations were all done in Python by hand. So it took a lot of time. I can unfortunately not give you a really nice, cool tool to work with. For the second question, so yeah, so the georeferencing, I'd say, is probably one of the largest challenges, not only to this, but I think to almost all coral reef monitoring, because GPS doesn't work like out of the box underwater, and you generally have to relay it with these buoys, and also the resolution that you in the end get out is like will seldom be good enough to actually match it with a satellite image like visually. Also, the resolution of the satellite images is limited in that sense. So generally, we're restricted to, at least for now, kind of the standard workflow where people establish these fixed monitoring sites and either leave permanent markers in the bottom, or one thing that we do a lot in the Red Sea in places where we cannot leave permanent markers is that we, when we're on the underwater, we deploy the surface marker buoys at the end of the transect, and then we get out the water, we measure the GPS at the surface, and then pull the buoys up from the surface. So this kind of puts the place on the map, but not good enough to meaningfully match it with remote sensing data. But yeah, this would be the holy grail of a lot of coral reef monitoring to do this.
Thank you.
Serena?
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions. I would love to chat. But yeah, one big question is kind of what depths are you often working at, and when do you start to see a quality kind of difference when you don't get enough light?
That's a good question. So we've, of course, mostly focused on shallow reefs. I'd say the the deepest real actual transect that we are monitoring is at like 12 meters. We've done some tests where we went down to 40 meters. In which case the mapping itself actually worked pretty well. It's just that the composition of the reef changes quite a lot. So the semantic segmentation performs a lot poorly because you've never seen these kind of things. And also it's true that the lighting becomes an issue just in general for the segmentation. So I think this could be overcome if you have really good strobes or really good onboard lighting. But I have to also say that this is kind of out of my expertise how well this will actually change the semantic segmentation. I mean, or how good we can actually get with these lights. But the mapping works surprisingly well.
So what is kind of like the main depths that you're working in? Is it under 12 meters?
I'd say most are between 3 and 9 meters. Yeah. I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the Red Sea at least, that's kind of where we get most of like the big reef building corals. And it's also where most of the touristic activity happens. So these have been kind of the focus for now, at least.
How is in the Great Barrier Reef? How is in the Great Barrier Reef?
It's way
There's a
more
lot of
variable.
variation.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But he's right in the touristy kind of areas, they will be shallower because they're easier to access and stuff. But yeah, the GBR can go really deep.
Okay.
Matt, did you have
Yes.
a question next?
Hi, thank you. That was a great talk. I have two questions. One of them is with your depth network, how did you initially train that? Did you base that on something trained above water, or did you have ground truths from underwater? Have you considered, like, have you compared it to a stereoscopic depth system? What kind of, yeah, how's that going?
So the networks that we use, it's a good question also. The networks that we use are actually just initialized from like ImageNet, the encoder and the decoder just from scratch. And they're just trained through this unsupervised procedure. So the depth estimation actually turns out, in my opinion, when I first tried it, surprisingly well for this. It's true that probably these days you could initialize it much better again, starting from like already something that's been trained on depth estimation in other domains. Whether this is in a supervised way or unsupervised way. And yeah, so this is probably one of the things we should actually do the most is using the limited amount, but there is data out there for underwater actual RGBD data and actually compare this. It's something that we're doing kind of now in the sense that we're trying to build a big data set from structure from motion reconstructions, where then we actually get the dense depth maps and we clean them up and use these as kind of pseudo ground truth depths and evaluate against this. But yeah, it's a really good question and it's a really big challenge.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. One other question I had was I saw one of your pictures you had like multiple GoPros on a camera rig. Was that for data collection, or are you running this pipeline on multiple cameras at once and fusing that in some way?
This was for data collection, so it was kind of it's something that we want to keep open for the future to analyze, like to really fuse the views from multiple cameras. But for now, we basically process one video at a time.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, John. I'm not an expert.
You might need to speak up a bit to make sure he can hear. Come forward, John.
Hi, John. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. I'm not an expert in machine learning or imagery or anything. Anyway, got interested by looking at one of the underwater imaging model that you were speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. My question is, when first part of the question is, does the speed of the camera that moves underwater affect the data, and if so or no? And how would you account for the ripple or the turbulent effect coming out of the water when the camera moves? So that you can, I mean, I have seen that you have certain techniques to denoising from the background effects, refraction, etc. So how would you account for those effects induced by the ripples or turbulence of the water around the camera in that model?
Okay, so this is also a good question. So because I'm skipping many details when I look at this underwater image formation model. So this changes, of course, with the depth. It changes even with the angle of the camera. So this is kind of a very idealized model where we have the camera perfectly straight and all of the water that we see basically follows the same rule. So the truth is we basically do not account for this. It's really it works in the average case. But there are also kind of other things in both of these, like the caustics and the backscatter removal techniques that lead to artifacts that we actually don't want. So one of the big ones is, of course, moving objects. If we don't explicitly filter them out, like fish, the like using the semantic segmentation, then of course the caustics removal will also filter out the fish. So that's one of the issues. Yeah, and then if I understood correctly, yeah, the first question really was about yeah, the depth in the water. So it's really tricky, and also because like these equations, they're really designed for the raw sensor measurements. So if it's really kind of equations that really only hold on the number of photons that hit the sensor and the camera. As soon as there any sort of processing done in the camera, which is true for every camera when you don't shoot in RAW, and there are basically no cameras that shoot video in RAW, you're already approximating everything, and then it becomes really hard to account for them.
Thank you. And one follow-up question. So you were talking about the accuracy when it comes to SLAM and all underwater. So do you have a measure of, okay, this certain application needs this much of accuracy underwater for SLAM kind of applications? Like, for example, if it is a sample collection of coral reefs for inspection something, or if you want to navigate through, so like what level of accuracy are you proposing?
Yeah, that's also a good question, because I think yeah, so it's true that it depends also on the use case, right? So for doing this kind of monitoring that we're doing, where we're really thinking about kind of mapping 100-meter transect in a few minutes, we don't necessarily need to go down to like the millimeter level. But for other applications, it's really important. Restoration people, for example, really like kind of getting really high resolution 3D maps of their restoration tables and kind of watch the corals grow on a centimeter scale. So I think it's really hard to put a precise threshold or boundary on it. I'd say maybe what's more important, in my experience, in my view, is maybe just the robustness. So I think having something that will always give you something reasonably good goes a long way. Instead of having a really accurate system that will crash if it gets the wrong kind of data.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there any
Thank
questions
you.
online from anyone?
Hi. Yes, I do
Hi.
have a question, actually many questions. So, quick introduction. I'm calling in from Hong Kong and I work on robotics, specifically soft robotic fish. And I love the idea that, yes, we need to collect more data and we need to share them. So, my question is, how can we combine the technology with robotics? And so, for example, we will have filters, we have IMU data, GPS data. What kind of data can make your work easier? Second is the curiosity. So for me, I've developed a robotic fish. It has a undulatory motion, so it sweeps back and forth the same area? Because you mentioned that part of your algorithm, you're basically having many layers and then you match it. So I was wondering how it could be applied there. And third is when it comes to navigation, could we adapt your algorithm to do underwater navigation where we have the robot map the entire area and navigate by itself? Because then you could solve the problem of, for example, defining transects, or because you have the whole entire robot's motion and then you can map the entire space by yourself. Thanks.
Thanks for the questions. So for yeah, the first question, of course, I think yeah, any SLAM system could benefit a lot from having additional input streams like IMU or GPS, or even if it's like approximate GPS. I think even if we were within, 2 meters, it would already helps a lot, especially if we're doing like long videos that we're processing. So I think there's a lot of synergy to be had. I don't have a robotics background at all. So going to your third question, my understanding is that for most underwater robots these days, we're at a hardware perspective, not at the point yet where we can run deep learning models kind of in real time. Last I heard, it was really a heating thing in the end, that generally when you have these NVIDIA Jetsons, for example, and you have them on your robot, you basically already use up almost all of your heat capacity just by running the control systems on there. And I think running like a full-fledged dense image model will for now be out of scope. But this information, take it with a grain of salt, because this is all hearsay. And yeah, for the second question, for the robot fish, this is I honestly don't know. I think I would have to know more about the actual setup. But it's interesting for sure.
I see. Thanks. As a follow-up, so I do have a lot of data footages from the robot fish. If I do want to send it to you, how can I participate in sending the data that we collect? Because we're working here in Hong Kong with like WWF, for example, to track horseshoe crabs and to check the coral coverage. So it'll be interesting to get your input as well.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to share the data. I think you can find my email or my contact pretty quickly. Maybe we can arrange a little, chat after this, and then kind of show some data and see kind of what could be done.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll do one last question before we end the session. Did you have one, Victor? Any other questions online? Last question.
I'd love a last question online, if that would be all right. Thank you. Hi, my name is Emily Darling. I'm a coral reef scientist at the Wildlife Conservation Society. First, thank you, Scarlett and team, for making these presentations available online. I saw the link on LinkedIn with Mermaid, which you mentioned, Jonathan. Great talk, by the way. We're really interested in how we can bring more unsupervised AI learning into photo images to really bring these tools to practitioners. So really enjoyed your talk. I had a quick question about the accuracy of the classification of the segments. As a coral ecologist, it was great to see some of your classes include things like coral genera. So looking at different types of acropora, different types of Porides, which is going to tell us a lot about the reef. As you're building these really great images and big composites underwater, could you talk a little bit about how you're developing the accuracy of what is actually in those segments? How can we bring more training data into this? And certainly making this all open source is a wonderful and thing we need to do in the future. Thanks very much.
Yeah, so this is kind of it's a bottomless pit, and it's a really good question, right? I mean, you're the expert in this. It's so hard to really make a data set that will work across regions, right? So for many coral genera, if you have a local expert from a local reef, they look at a specific coral from a specific growth form, they can tell you the genus or even the species, right? If you move not even far, you move 50 kilometers, the same species might look completely different. Maybe you can still say the genus. But yeah, so this is really hard, and that's also why for now this data set is constrained to the Red Sea. The Red Sea has a bunch of really visually dominant genera, but also not all genera are visually dominant. So in this case, we were restricted to the growth form, and even the growth form, it's hard, right? So when we look at kind of something that's submassive or has these thin plates and encrusting, right? Even that can be ambiguous. So I think we're I mean, yeah, it's also a very different kind of use case, right? So I think a lot of the images that are analyzed with tools like Mermaid and CoralNet, it's really species specific, high resolution data. You can see the polyps and so on. It's very different from the data that we're looking at. So I think I wish I had a good answer. But yeah, I think it's one of the hardest challenges of this whole business is building data sets across different kind of resolutions in terms of image resolution, classification resolution, and so on. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks everyone so much online and in the room for joining. We're going to leave it there because it's just about 10 a.m. But thank you so much for joining us, Jonathan. And I think we'll take our conversation offline as well. So we'll just move room and then we'll join back in.
Thank you very much, everybody, for attending and for all the questions. Thank you.